Agenda this morning. That's the 2019 draft operating and capital budgets tabling. So who am I going to turn it over to? Okay, Chief, over to you.
Good morning, Madam Chair, board members. So we're pleased to be here today for the tabling of the 2019 draft budget. With me today presenting the budget is Director General Deborah Fraser, our Chief Financial Officer Jeff Paterno, and Wally Salem from our Finance Department. First, any document like this takes a dedicated team, and I want to thank all our finance staff who are here today and all the members of the police service who contributed to the development of this document. I am proud of all the women and men of the Ottawa Police Service who commit each day to serve our community and put their lives on the line to keep us all safe. As you'll see, we have developed a budget designed to maintain and, in some cases, enhance policing services in Ottawa. The budget builds on the work of the past board and has taken into account feedback that we've received from the public. The budget was developed to address Ottawa's growing policing needs, stabilize staffing issues, and address key policing issues in community policing: traffic enforcement, violence against women, and gun violence suppression. There are 5 components to this presentation. And the presentation will be shared by myself, DG Fraser, and our CFO. As you well know, our city is unique in its vast territory and multiple policing requirements because of the geography. We have urban, suburban, and rural areas to police. And the context in which we police is always changing, locally, provincially, and nationally. Our members work in an increasingly fluid and difficult environment. We see it in almost every area that we work. There are changing crime and social disorder issues at neighborhood levels and new demands for service. We are seeing new legislative and oversight trends that impact the work we do and add to work pressures. Societal and demographic changes have led to new and changing training requirements, new types of equipment, and new investigative techniques. Trust in policing and community perceptions continue to be an issue requiring investment in resources to work with our community. We are enhancing our approach to community policing, and I want to reiterate to the board and to our community that we have heard clearly and recognized that we have a gap which we are addressing. Our business plan is used to ensure that we are identifying and adapting to the trends that we see and that we stay focused on our strategic priorities. The reality is that these changes usually require more police intervention, training, and equipment. Very rarely do we see our responsibilities reduced. Even the legalization of cannabis required an increase in training of drug recognition experts and others who can spot impaired drivers on our roads. Without the necessary investments upstream, police are one of the public institutions impacted by having to respond to social disorders 24/7. It's my job as your chief to put forward a budget that prepares our service to meet the challenges our community sees both now and in the future. And I believe that we've done that. This budget provides us with the resources we need to continue to take on gun violence, to respond to emergencies like tornadoes or mass casualty events like we saw in January. It also ensures that we have the members ready to deploy for large-scale searches of missing people. As you have heard, one of our priorities in this budget is to enhance our capacity to deal with neighborhood-based issues, to address traffic, and to ensure that we are properly staffing our investigative units that deal with violence against women. The last 2 years, we've seen a significant deployment of new equipment like naloxone and conducted energy weapons. We will continue to need to manage large protests and events, and we will also continue to be required to deal with increasing related issues to mental health and substance use disorder. Our service is made up of almost 2,000 individuals who are committed to the safety and security of this community. I've named just a few of the functions they do in service to our community. When developing this budget, we sought to ensure that we could maintain our services and address key policing issues. These include enhancing community policing, properly staffing our partner assault and sexual assault and child abuse sections, focusing on traffic safety enforcement, and continuing our focus on gun suppression. I should note that the Ottawa Police Service gun violence suppression strategy saw an increase in staff in 2018 of 10 new officers, which is funded by Public Safety Canada through the province. We are hopeful that a further funding announcement is expected from the provincial government early this year. We also sought to stabilize staffing issue and address some budget-based risks in terms of WSIB and overtime. This pop to cop slide is one that people use as one of the measures to compare to other jurisdictions in Canada. You can see that since 2011, we have dropped 3 spots, leaving us with 1 officer for each 529 residents, compared to 1 officer for 446 residents in 2011. We've also seen an increase in our violent crime severity index over the past couple of years, like many other large urban centres. The Ottawa Police Service did not add any resources from 2010 to 2015. One of the driving factors was that in 2012 we started a review of our deployment model, and we wanted to restructure our police service to ensure that we maximize the use of our sworn officers. In 2016, we identified the need to continue growing our service to meet new and emergency crime and disorder issues. Some of the budget highlights. A significant component of our 2019 budget pressures involve maintaining services. There is also a need to respond to demands for enhancing our services. We are requesting a staffing increase for community policing, violence against women, and traffic enforcement and safety. We are addressing historical budget-based shortfalls and adding a small front desk civilian casual pool to deal with peak volumes to deal with collision reporting centres. We also want to continue supporting our members by building on progress made with our member wellness initiative. We continue moving forward with the board-approved conducted energy weapon expansion, the modernization roadmap, the radio project, and a facility strategic plan. We're also managing our fleet costs and continue to work on a work plan associated with our equity, diversity, and inclusion programs and trust in policing initiatives. I'd like to turn over now to Deborah and Jeff. Yeah, you
good thing nobody heard that. So thanks very much, Chief. What I'd like to talk about a bit before we get into the detailed numbers is how we connect the budget that we're tabling today with the direction that the board gave us at the last meeting. So you'll recall that when we tabled the budget directions report, we identified that we had an $18 million requirement. That means that we need to fund $18 million more in this budget. And the chief cited that was equivalent to a 5.1% tax increase if it had gone through that way. So we were, as police staff, we met with the city treasurer to have a look at what options there might be to fund the $18 million somewhat differently and to mitigate that tax increase and bring it into the 3% range. So we had a very successful meeting. There were 3 new revenue sources identified at the meeting, and one of them, the red light camera revenue, is an ongoing revenue source, and you'll see that increase over the next couple of budgets as more red light cameras are introduced and the revenue flows into the police budget. A one-time source was identified, and that's the tax stabilization reserve. It's there to help mitigate tax increases. It's meant to help smooth tax increases in over time. So we identified a $4.8 million requirement from that source. And as it turns out, there's $0.5 million of the grant that's flowed from the federal government to the province to us that we can book in 2019 to help fund that $18 million requirement. So you'll see, and Jeff will talk about this more as we go through the strategy, that is a key to bringing the budget in at 3%. So here's kind of a way to dive into the numbers. I always start with the bottom of the slide. What we're tabling is a 3% tax increase. There is the 12.2% net increase that goes along with this budget. And we divide the groupings to follow the presentation format that the city has, or we try to stick to that. So at the top you'll see that it takes $12.1 million this year to just maintain service levels. And the chief talked about that in the slide I was supposed to have, that said, some of the board's approved programs from last year flow through to this year, and they're captured in the maintained services area. And when you look at that 12.1 million against the budget increase, you can see that it's really taking 3% to just maintain our service levels, not including enhancements. And our primary enhancement is on the next line. It's the 30 officer increase in 2019. That $3.7 million cost is 30 officers starting in the fall for 2019. But it also picks up that annualization cost because the same pattern occurred last year. So we have to build into the budget the full year cost of the 2018 officers. So that's $3.7 million in total, and that's really our new service enhancement area. You see, we highlight the modernization roadmap. It's a $1.3 million investment in 2019, and that's the work that we're doing with PricewaterhouseCoopers to create a new modernized environment at Ottawa Police that's built on an automated format. We'll talk about this a bit more as we go through the presentation, but the city's embarked on a somewhat similar exercise, and we've ensured that our modernization roadmap aligns with the cities. We call it our partner first strategy, so that we have opportunities to share functions or in fact trade functions later on. There's $0.1 million worth of revenue that comes into the budget as a result of us adjusting our user fees, and then there's the $4.8 million of one-time funding. The red light camera revenue is captured within the $12.1 million, as is the 0.5 of the grant. So at the end of the day, this budget is tabled at 3% with the one-time funding strategy. And I'm going to turn it over to Jeff now to talk more about the details.
Thank you, Deborah. So I will just touch on the funding strategy that Deborah just talked about. As per board direction, OPS staff held several meetings with city staff throughout January to discuss strategies to moderate the police tax rate increase. These meetings resulted in a funding strategy enabling OPS to achieve the 3% tax rate increase in 2019. The funding strategy enables OPS to smooth base budget increases over 4 years while moderating the police tax rate increase. The plan requires one-time funding for 2019 to 2021, totaling $12 million. Of this amount, $4.8 million is included in the 2019 budget. In addition, $5 million is required in 2020, and a further $2.2 million in 2021. It is important to note that Council approval applies to 2019 funding only, as Council approves budgets 1 year at a time. Funding for 2020 and 2021 would be subject to Council approvals in each of those years, respectively. In addition to the one-time funding discussed on this slide, the strategy also includes the red light camera revenue that Deborah previously discussed. The 2019 draft operating budget reflects gross operating expenses of $349.5 million, with revenue of $43 million. This brings the net operating budget to $306.5 million. The gross expense budget can be further broken down as follows. Compensation represents the largest share of gross expenses at 82%, or $286 million. Materials, supplies, and services are 8%, or $29.5 million. Financial charges, 6%, $22.5 million. And city costs, which mainly reflect facilities, fleet maintenance, and communication system, come in at 4%, or $11.5 million. This slide represents the key budget financial info on one slide. The budget increase is $12.2 million, bringing the total net operating budget to $306.5 million. The budget increase is funded with $4 million from a 1.5% assessment growth increase and $8.2 million from a 3% police tax rate increase. And based on these numbers, the estimated annual tax increase on the average homeowner is $18, bringing the estimated 2019 police cost for the average homeowner to $621. Moving on to the operating forecast. Based on a recommendation by the Auditor General, the OPS provides a 3-year forecast as part of its annual budget submission. The operating budget forecast for the 2020 to 2022 period is based on a staffing plan that will see an increase of the sworn officer complement by 30 officers each year. The forecast also relies heavily on the funding strategy previously discussed and is included in the maintained services line on this chart. When all factors have been considered, the tax rate increase for the forecast period is steady at 4.1% each year. The majority of this increase, as can be seen on the slide, is driven by maintaining services and the cost of the 30-officer growth plan. We'll now move on to capital. The OPS aims to provide an adequate capital envelope to ensure that assets such as fleet, facilities, and information technology are replaced as required. For 2019, the capital budget request totals $37.2 million. Funding for these projects is essentially split evenly between pay-as-you-go funding along with debt. The capital budget is broken down into 3 categories. $8.4 million is required for renewal of assets, such as fleet replacement, IT infrastructure, and telecom, as well as facilities life cycle. This category is entirely funded from pay-as-you-go reserves. The growth category requires $18.2 million. This request is for Phase 1 and Phase 2 of the new South Division Police Facility located in South Ottawa at Prince of Wales Drive and Lodge Road. This amount is entirely funded with debt. The strategic initiatives category requires $10.6 million, with the major project being the modernization roadmap. Moving on to the 10-year forecast for capital. The 10-year capital requirement for OPS is estimated at $271 million. Renewal of assets, which includes fleet replacement, facilities, along with IT infrastructure, totals $123 million and is largely funded from pay-as-you-go reserves, with a small amount coming from the sale of assets. Growth projects total $49 million and is largely for Phase 2 of the South Division. Debt funding is the primary source for the growth projects. And strategic initiatives account for $98.6 million of the forecast. The largest project included in this category is the new Central Patrol Facility, which is budgeted to cost $43 million. Funding for these projects would mainly come from debt and pay-as-you-go reserves. Overall funding is split 65% pay-as-you-go funding, 34% debt, and 1% from the sale of assets. Moving on to the timetable. In terms of schedule and timetable, the 2019 draft operating and capital budgets is being tabled today at the board along with council. The FAC, the board's Finance and Audit Committee, will meet on February 20th to review and consider the budget. February 25th is the board scheduled to consider, review, and approve. And finally, City Council review and approval on March 6th. Madam Chair, that concludes our presentation. Prior to turning it back over to the Chief, I'd just like to take a few moments to recognize some individuals that have made significant contributions to the budget development. Wally Salem, our Manager of Financial Services, is sitting here, and his team is with me. Jonathan Sweet, Sheila Hamilton, Valerie McCallum, Owen Bell. I'd also like to recognize Heather Fisher for her significant contributions in creating the budget. And with that, I'll turn it back over to the Chief.
Thank you, Jeff, and my thanks as well to all the finance staff, my executive, our senior leadership team. We've done a lot to get us to today. One person I want to recognize in particular is our Director General. This is her last budget. Deborah has been with the. Deborah has committed over about 34 years to municipal government here in Ottawa. 25 of those years, 24 with the Ottawa Police Service, started in 95 with the Ottawa Regional Police Service, working under the tutelage of a guy named Steve Kanalakis. And we searched back the archives to see exactly how much time she spent in Gloucester and Nepean, but they couldn't find those documents. They're buried in dust. But anyways, Deborah, thank you so much for all the work that you've done, the support that you've provided me as your chief for the past 7 years. I will miss you for 4 days. I'm sure, because Deborah's retiring on April 30th. And I'm sure that the new chief and the new executive will also miss your wisdom, your humor, but your corporate knowledge and corporate history. So thank you so much, Deborah.
Thank you, Chief. I was just, first of all, the Chief doesn't think I'm funny, and he tells me that in my performance appraisal in writing, so that's why he mentioned that. But it was my first budget. I ran into Rick Shirelli, and I was the financial analyst for the City of Nepean at the time, and I just ran into Rick in the elevator, and on that budget, we had to cut $200,000 from the budget. We were not quite sure how we were going to do it, and Bob Letourneau produced the biggest pair of golden scissors so we could actually cut the budget. So we've come a long way in terms of our strategy and development. I want to thank everybody. It's been an honor and a privilege to work for Ottawa Police, and it continues to be. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Well, I guess the cat's out of the bag. Chief told me that was a secret. But okay. Anyway, thank you for your many years of service, Deborah, and we look forward to working with you until your retirement date. So, Chief, Jeff, Wally, Deborah, thank you all for your presentation this morning, and thank you to your team, Wally, for all of the work that they have done to get us to this point. When we started this process, the board asked the chief to show us the real numbers that, in his professional opinion, we need to keep our community safe. The presentation today, I think, laid that information out for us, basically 3% on the police tax rate, but if you add in the one-time cost that we're asking the city to fund, it comes to a total of 5.1%. And I can say, as the chair of this board, I am satisfied that this budget will address the policing needs of our growing community. It's important that we hear and understand the reality facing our police service and be well informed as we discuss this budget in the weeks to come. Certainly the rise in the escalation of street crime in our community has had a corresponding rise in community concern, and that is something that we need to address. While no one will deny the need for policing services, it is our responsibility to taxpayers to ensure that we mitigate the overall police requirements on the city budget to the extent possible. That's why I will be directing the chief to bring back a budget options list that excludes any impact on frontline police services to our Finance and Audit Committee meeting on February 20th. This will allow the service to achieve the sworn officers increase it requires and maintain our commitment to enhancing community policing, but clearly we need to sharpen our pencils and ensure we have looked at all options before we vote on the final budget. So the first direction that I'm going to be giving today is that the chief be directed to prepare and present to the board at its Finance and Audit Committee meeting on February 20th a budget options list that does not impact frontline services to residents and moderates the service's reliance on the new revenue sources. So that's the first one. And I do have a second budget direction. I think I'll just share it with you right now. I know before some of us got here that the Police Services Board made a decision around the background fee structure for police checks, and it was done on a full cost recovery basis. I don't know about the rest of you, but I've been hearing a lot from the community about the hardship that that is creating. So with that in mind, I have one further direction I'd like to give to the chief concerning the budget, that the board we've been hearing from members of the community about the impact of our new structure, and so I'd like to ask that the chief be directed to prepare and present to the board at its Finance and Audit Committee meeting on February 20th possible fee structure options that are not full cost recovery, because the decision that the former board made was based on full cost recovery, which reduce the cost of background checks for youth 18 and under, as well as nonprofit organizations, and and identify the resulting budget pressures for each option. I think that it's a conversation we need to have. I know that there are members of community organizations that intend to attend our Audit and Finance Committee meeting to raise this issue, and I think that it's incumbent upon us to have all of the information and understand what the cost would be of reducing some of those costs. So those are the budget directions that I'd like to give. I'd like to remind you this is the tabling of the budget today. It's not the consideration. So all we will be hearing from members of the Police Services Board today are high-level questions of clarification on the budget. The consideration of it will come on February 20th. So with that in mind, Member Egley.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and thank you for those directions, especially the first one. The Chief and I have had some discussions over the last couple of days along the same lines, and in our discussions he had certainly indicated to me that he thought there was further opportunities with what we call the back office services, that where further efficiencies could be achieved working with the City Finance Department. And I can tell you I reached out to both the City Manager and our City Treasurer, who've indicated along the lines of your direction that they are more than happy to continue to have those discussions and see what synergies and efficiencies that we can find there. So I thank you for that. I had the same thing written down, so we're on the same page, and I think based on the discussions that I've had with the Chief, he's on that page as well, as is Senior Finance on the City side. So I'm really hopeful that we can come back on the 20th and have a budget that's closer to the council mandated numbers. Just a quick comment and then a quick question. So what I saw on the slides, to me, I don't think is a sustainable model. We're looking at dipping in the tax stabilization fund. I know we say on a one-time basis, but it's really a three-time basis. It's over the next 3 years. It's not just this year. And even with doing that, I'm seeing a projected tax increase of 4.1% going forward in each of those years, which is likely going to be over and above what council will direct in those years and what the residents are prepared to pay. So I think we're on a very difficult path here, and in light of the direction that you've given and the Chiefs accept it, I hope that everybody on both sides of the table can roll up their sleeves and come up with something that is more sustainable. My very couple of quick questions are one of the pieces that you indicated as a need or a pressure is a creation of a pool of FTEs for the front desk, essentially. So these would be sort of non-patrol positions that you're filling. And I guess my question is, I do understand that there's a fairly significant number of police employees, officers that for a variety of reasons are working in accommodated situations.
This is clarification on the budget presentation. It's not the details of the budget. That's for consideration on February 20th. This is just high.
I understand that. The question I wanted to ask, Madam Chair, is if we could have by that meeting an explanation as to why officers who are on the accommodation list couldn't be diverted to that role as opposed to hiring brand new people to do the work. Because I think we have existing resources, we should find a way to tap into those. The other question that I had is, we keep on talking about the number of 5.1, and I think we have to be crystal clear here. My understanding is the ask when you roll in growth, and I understand everybody rolls in growth, but the actual ask for this budget is 6.6%, not 5.1%. And that's also with you've got to add into that again the funding that's going to come from the tax stabilization fund. So it's 6.6 plus those additional funds to keep the engines going, so to speak. Is that accurate, Chief?
Well, as I mentioned at the previous meeting, then the tax direction from council and the board will be 4.5%. So apples to apples, when we talk about what the...
and as I said last time, I don't disagree with that, Chief. I just want everybody in this room to understand that your budget ask is 6.6%, not 5.1.
5.1% plus the 1.5 growth that's allotted by...
but that's 6.6% increase in tax. Just so we're all clear. Thank you.
I mean, I think we could probably have this discussion offline, but growth is the number of new residents that are contributing to the tax base that weren't there before, but that is to fund the additional. If we had 50,000 additional residents, then that money that comes in from that taxation is just maintaining the level of service. It's not increasing.
I understand that, Chair, but it's all tax money, and I think we're talking about what the budget is going to be and what the taxes...
It's not an additional 1.5% from the existing tax base. It's growth of the tax base.
Correct.
So it's a bit... I think it's a bit...
It's all taxpayers' money.
It's all taxpayers' money, but there's more taxpayers contributing. It's not that we're asking for a higher rate from those taxpayers. Member Meehan.
I would just like to reiterate what Councillor Aguilar said. My concern with this budget is that it reflects the needs of the police force, yet we're not putting it on really on the tax base. We're going into this tax stabilization fund for $4.8 million. And my concern is if we don't find efficiencies this year and going forward, we're going to be tapping into a reserve that I don't think really reflects accurately on the tax base. So I would say that we have to find efficiencies somewhere so that we bring this tax rate down. I'm hearing from citizens who want to see an increase in policing, they want to see increased police presence, but they cannot afford what we're proposing. So my concern is really going into this tax stabilization fund, that if we tap into that, we're not really reflecting the actual needs of the police in our community.
Okay, well, we'll certainly have this conversation on February 20th. Is there any other member Valiquette?
Merci, Madame la Présidente. Bonjour, Chef. My interests lie in the revenues that we can produce. So I'm very interested in revisiting the whole issue of paid duty, as we've talked about before, and how we can maximize in that area, as well as the red light cameras. So I hope that we'll have a further discussion about how we can improve and increase and maximize in those areas. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Member Bluestein?
In preparing for this meeting today and for going forward, there are some city municipal police services across the country that have started foundations and funding from other resources to fund technology and some other advancements in crime prevention. And I'm wondering if we've looked at perhaps beginning our own foundation of that sort.
Madam Chair, we had that discussion a number of years ago around the creation of a foundation, and creating a foundation is a whole new separate business line and presents some challenges with respect to the Police Services Act and our ability to fund the police service outside tax base and property revenue. And at the time, we decided to go with our annual gala that raises funds from the community to be able to give back to the charity. And I know Deborah has some memory and recollection over that discussion as well.
Being the oldest person in the room. Actually, the board rejected the idea of the foundation at the time. We brought forward the proposal, as Member Blaustein spoke of, to start to raise funds and probably do two things with them: support the community, but as well enhance equipment for the police operations. And the board at the time didn't support that notion. They thought that funding police equipment and police needs through the tax rate was their preferred option. But we've been very successful with the gala, and there's a lot of support for the police. It's always an option we can revisit.
And perhaps this is something that we need to take another look at and review what the options are in this direction. I'd also like to know if it's possible for the next meeting, just out of curiosity. So we have our cop-to-pop numbers. I was wondering if we have any geographic numbers, square kilometer numbers, because Ottawa being such a huge city with so many rural areas, I think we have some very special concerns in that regard. So I'm wondering if it would be possible to get some of those numbers too.
Madam Chair, we can certainly address the second one by the next meeting as far as looking at if other police services have the square kilometers. Member Brosey is absolutely right. Ottawa is one of the largest geographic areas in the province, if not the country, as far as municipal policing is concerned, so it presents those challenges. So we'll dig up those numbers as best as we can. On the foundation piece, I'll need at some point some direction from the board for us to research that. I can tell you it won't be for the FAC meeting or the next board meeting. That will require a significant amount of work to be done. So maybe later on some discussion to be had around that one.
Okay, seeing no more members, we do have a member of Ottawa City Council who's joined us, Councillor Riley Brackington. He has a question, so I'm going to recognize him now to ask his question.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and to the Chief and his two deputies and staff, thank you for the presentation today. And Madam Chair, your advice on keeping it high level was heard, and I'll just ask one question of clarification, and that is, in the budget, I did not see an efficiencies line. Normally in the past budgets that I've been following, there have been a list of efficiencies that the Chief and his staff have found, and I believe if I've heard you correctly, you've asked the Chief to come back at the committee in a couple of weeks to identify those. I just want to make sure that's the case, that the Chief has been given direction to find additional efficiencies, yes, and that could be worked into a final budget that this board passes, I guess, a week after that.
The direction is that he bring us a list of options that does not affect frontline police services, but that could create efficiencies that we could discuss at the Audit and Finance Committee meeting on February 20th.
Excellent. I won't debate it. I share the same sentiments that Councillor Eglai has raised about the amount of tax money that's being used in this budget, and I'll just speak at the committee meeting. My second question, just follow up to the last question, was whether there are multiple criteria that are used to determine the number of police per population. We keep seeing that population per police FTE member stat used, but I think there are other variables at play when police forces determine their demand for staff, and I just wanted to know if it's possible at the committee meeting for the Chief to explain the demands that are being weighed when he determines how many police FTE he asks for. So again, with the ask of 30 staff per year, if he could just explain what those demands are. I don't think it's just population-based, but just a further explanation at committee would be helpful for me. And that's it.
Okay. Member Mann.
I just wanted to ask the Chief. Chief, does the budget requirement does that include the additional cost of policing that comes with the licensed marijuana? We knew that there was going to be an additional cost. Does it include that?
The training dollars associated with drug recognition experts is included in our base budgets because the province decided to allow provincially store controlled and has a central team that is responsible for the enforcement, much like the AGCO, and that the OPP have a centralized team to deal with those investigations. Those costs are not being borne upon the municipal police service.
They are?
They're not.
They're not. Okay. And we're supposed to be getting some funds from the province to offset some of these costs. Is that a new source of revenue for the police budget?
We haven't received any information with respect to grants from the province targeting this area as far as marijuana and legalization of cannabis. We know that there are some funds that are going to be made available, but we also know at the same time that the province is going through a vigorous review of all the grants with respect to policing, to ride programs, and other existing grants that they provide us, and so we've secured those sources of revenue for this year. However, there may be a change in the upcoming years as far as the allocation of grants.
Okay, seeing no further questions received on the report. Okay, and adjourned? Thank you. Thank you, everyone.